Have you ever wondered how I create these podcasts? Well, now, thanks to our friends at Anchor.fm, you too can create your own free podcast with included tools on their website. You don't even need a microphone, a nice computer, a lot of equipment. You can go right on their app, which you can download at Anchor.fm while you're signing up for your own podcast, and record directly with them. You can take phone calls and voicemails, etc. And from day one, you can make ad revenue for your podcast. There aren't any other platforms out there that from day one allow you to have ad revenue. So if you download the free Anchor app at Anchor.fm, you can get started today. They are now our host for the podcast, so we're stoked to be a part of their system. And you can too. Again, check out Anchor.fm to get started today. And now, on with the show. Hi, welcome to Notes from the Road. I'm your host, Evan Peary. I've spent more than a decade on tour with acts like Pentatonics, Dan and Shay, and Andy Mineo. And I've slept everywhere from tour buses and floors to one-star hotel rooms and 15-passenger vans. My goal with this podcast is to provide a window into the side of touring life you don't see on Instagram or MTV. The behind-the-scenes, nitty-gritty tales of comedy, chaos, and camaraderie. Every episode, I'll be speaking with a different touring professional I've met along the way, giving them the opportunity to tell their story of how they got started, where they're headed, and everything else in between. This episode, I'm joined by Mike Finn, whose touring resume includes Thomas Rhett, Dillon Francis, and Owl City, among others. Mike's a guy who always lights up a room, a boisterous Massachusetts native who's both intimidating and teddy bear-like all at once. His story starts in a crowded van with friends, playing tiny hole-in-the-wall places, and leads to planning, sourcing, and executing large-scale tours and huge festival shows. We talk about goals, gains, and overall improvement, both on the road and in life. This is Notes from the Road with Mike Finn. Welcome to...
What's the name of this?
Notes from the Road podcast.
Notes from the Road.
Yeah.
It's happening.
It's
Evan,
happening.
Notes from the Road. In the words of... What's her name? Penny Lane. It's all happening.
It's all happening.
The reason I tour.
Can we quote that and not get in trouble on a podcast?
I'm sure you can.
Okay,
you
right,
can
because
do
we're not
whatever you
using
want.
a sample of
It's
it.
pirate radio, technically.
It is pirate
isn't it?
radio.
That's why we can curse and talk about butt stuff. Is this going to be like a
An
good
edited
Christian?
one? No,
Like,
say whatever you want.
Okay.
Yeah, this is... Say whatever you'd like, within reason, because again, it's still me.
I hate how my voice sounds on recording, so I can't wait to sit in my car and listen to this.
It's going to be
just
amazing.
Hate myself more.
I've listened through a few now and feel
Are you
okay with
getting
it.
used to it?
Yeah, I think it's more figuring out like idiosyncratic things and trying to slow down and ask questions and be poignant. And I feel like I have a tendency to rush when I speak. And
Sometimes.
that's it. And
I'm sure we all do.
We do. All right, Michael Finn.
Evan Pieri, Mike Finn.
So you got your start touring. So now, long time touring, probably about a decade in.
11 years.
11 years.
11 years this year.
What do you remember from the first time you ever went on tour? So Mike is on the crew, tour management, production management, handling the everyday needs of an artist side of things. He and I both aren't the artists. We've never been. I don't know if Mike ever wanted to be. Yeah, it sounds like Mike. Yeah. So our goal has always been to kind of keep it moving, keep everybody on task. And Mike, I feel like, has gotten very efficient and become a very, very, very elevated version of a tour manager.
Do you think other people feel that way?
I mean, I feel that way.
Sweet.
I've gotten to see it
at least one person.
I've gotten to see it for we're going on 10 years at least of
true.
us knowing each other.
Just my hair depleting off my head.
Yeah, when I met Mike Finn, it was at the Worcester Palladium in 2008.
Was it not Northeastern after hours?
No, I met you at the Palladium.
It was after that? Mm-hmm. Northeastern was after that?
I think so. So I met you at the Palladium.
That was like the first night of tour for you guys. You were leaving like that night to hit the road.
Maybe. I'm thinking more, the time that I remember
show.
the most was the Christmas show. Yeah, Mike's...
Is it me and Zates? was
and
behind?
Craig.
And Craig,
I hadn't met Craig at that point. And so Craig and you were selling merch for me that night because at that point of my touring career, I was literally wearing
Everything.
10 hats at once.
Yeah.
Selling merch, tour managing, guitar teching, setting up gear, tearing down gear, chasing after everybody.
Yeah.
But I remember meeting Mike and his mop of red hair.
It was beautiful.
And I left him and Craig in charge of selling merchandise all night.
Man, remember the numbers they used to put up at the merch table those nights?
Yeah, so
it's insane.
Those were the first sellout shows for a band like for 4 Year Strong, for a band like that in home. It was
back then. I used to think that venue was like that could have been the Garden for all I.
And I mean, I think it probably was for everybody from that city.
Standing on that stage was like, oh my god, it's so big.
Yeah.
Now you go back and you're like, oh my god, it's so small.
Well, because
it's still a good size. Well,
because you've done those size venues now. But all right, tell me your first memories in that era, I guess, of like you getting on the road, and what. Give me logistically, what were you doing? Where were you? And like, I imagine it was a van tour, but you.
Yeah, I mean, my first like real tour was in spring break of my sophomore year of college. Right? Yeah. Sophomore year of college was with the band The Carrier and Energy. They did a little like co-tour just out to like Michigan, out to Detroit and back from Boston. It's like a week long, 8-9 days long. And we fit 13 people into a 15 passenger with a little Connors U-Haul trailer. And yeah, just went and played a bunch of like hardcore shows and punk shows and slept on basements. And I think at that time, like Carrier wasn't paying me, but they would like give me like $5 or $10 every couple of days. And then we would just steal food from grocery stores because we're all like, I don't know, all punks. And I was vegan at the time, so I was just like eating whatever I could, which was essentially just hummus and pita that I stole. And we'd do the whole load up the cart from the grocery store and just walk out. And then try to get into the van as fast as possible.
I feel like all you New England kids, that was like your MO. Everybody had a version.
It's that or dumpster dive, you know?
Right, and so how old were you at this point?
19-ish. Yeah, 19.
Right, and so how much does a 19-year-old kid really need? Or how much money, in a sense?
Yeah,
like, so you guys were just kind of...
I mean, I was working on campus just at the art gallery running the door just because it was like a student job. So.
Right, and what campus, where was that?
UMass Lowell, University of Massachusetts.
And so were you there for a little bit?
Yeah, I graduated high school in 2006, so fall of 2006 I joined. And it's funny, that's kind of a story on its own. I wanted to go to school for music business since I could remember, maybe since 7th, 8th grade. I was just like, I want to be a producer. I want to be in music. Little did I know you had to be like musically talented to be a producer and or what that meant. So I just knew I wanted to be in music business. And I think that was just from the local music scene and being involved with friends with bands and selling t-shirts and just seeing like running doors and just the culture of it. UMass Lowell has a really, really, really reputable music program. I won't say music business, but music program. And their music school is very, very strict. And so I met with like the recruiters and said I wanted to be a music business major. And they kind of neglected to tell me that it was actually a music performance degree with a concentration in music business. And it required an audition to even be in the school.
Which is, from what I know of friends that have gone to music schools, either Berkeley or elsewhere, yes, that's like the starting point is an actual audition of some sort.
I didn't know that. And I've taken like a couple music theory classes, but like I don't want to play an instrument nor be on stage or a performer at all. I just want to be in the world working on deals, So a week before moving, my freshman year, I get a call from the music school being like, "Hey, we just wanted to schedule your audition." And I said, "My audition for what?" And they were like, "Well, you wanted to be music business, correct?" And I'm like, "Yeah." "Well, you need to audition an instrument to be music business." And I was like, "Did you just hear what you said? Like, I don't care about music performance at all. Like, why am I why do I need to audition, you know? And they were like, well, and that's when they explained to me that it was
that was part of the process of admission to that program.
And so I was like, well, this kind of stinks. Why didn't anybody tell me prior? And they were like, oh, sorry, like, I don't know. And I was like, okay, what do I do? I'm moving into school next week. I would say meet with your advisor and discuss other like major paths or whatever, other majors. I was like, cool. Well, thanks for nothing.
Well, so what happened after that? What was your move?
I think I ended up being a liberal arts major, and then I took all of the classes I wanted to as electives. And so I don't know if I'm still a freshman at UMass Lowell because I took so many electives, but I was taking all the music business classes. My favorite classes were the law classes: entertainment law, copyright law, internet law. And at the time, I mean, we're talking 10 years ago now, like, or more, like Napster wasn't a thing, but, you know, downloading and like copyright infringement was like
still the first wave of iPod.
Exactly.
Like
so iTunes was still, you were
were
still loading your music onto iPods or Apple iTunes or whatever from your CDs. So like, it was still kind of a new ground. So those classes were really interesting to me. And they were all like 300 and 400 level classes, like junior and senior.
Did you talk your way in? How did you even get into the class?
They just let me in, and like the professors were all like retired lawyers, and they were all awesome. And I gave it my all, but they were like, it's just too advanced for you. So none of them failed me, but they all gave me D's because I showed up every day and I gave it my all, you know. But we were taking like, what was it, entertainment law or business law. We were taking old CPA exams as our exams, and I didn't even know what half the words meant. So I just started drawing stick figures on the tests and just being like, I'm sorry, I'm not smart enough for this class.
But with that, do you feel like that gave you as much as some of it you didn't understand or it was too advanced for where you were at as a student at that point? Do you feel like that kind of set the groundwork for where you are now to understand, you know, you're at a point where you're looking at pretty large deals and understanding what makes sense for the artists you work for and have worked for.
We referred to contracts in that class as Ks. Instead of saying contracts, we would just say K. And then in papers, it was K. Okay. So I still refer to contracts as K for some reason, like in email and stuff, and it's just like habitual at this point. But yeah, I love those classes, so I took away the most. And I was kind of always that way with school. Like, unless I was interested in it, I really didn't care. And I would just do enough to get by. But then if I'm really interested, I'll like give it my all, you know?
See, because I think I finished school, but my education was primarily just business. Like, I have a degree in entrepreneurial studies. Mm-hmm. No idea what I was going to do with it, but I hit a point in college where I was like, I just want to be on the road. I had met enough people and I had friends locally from home that I've hung around with and watched sort of what went on in the background at shows. And, you know, I hit a point in college where we were involved with planning shows and putting shows on. And, you know, the finishing school was one thing, but then getting on the road. And, you know, once you get out there, college prepares you for the general gist of understanding how to use a spreadsheet, emailing people back in a professional manner, and using your words well. But a music business degree, you know, who knows if where you're at right now, if that would have even mattered.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
You got a solid foundation. It sounds like better foundation than I probably had coming into it.
I would say like I just enjoyed those classes. I wouldn't even say it was a foundation at a point because like none of which I really like. I don't know. They were informative. I'll say it like that. Like that's really it. Everything else is like, especially in touring, as you know, everything you know like is like it's an experience based specifically with touring, you know. So even though through college I was like starting to get like some spreadsheets and I'd meet other tour guys and I'd be like, hey, send me your merch sheet, and it was like back then it was, you know,
all Excel.
Yeah, and it's still I still use Excel, but like or before at Venue and stuff, but like it was just like getting familiar with those and like starting And it was solely like, oh, this is kind of cool to like make a business out of this, out of like just hanging with friends. You know?
Sure, and in theory, you're working for the band, but you're working for yourself, and that's the thing that you find out sort of quickly is that it's a self-employment scenario. You know, at least in the earliest stages of my touring. So, all right, so you short van tour. We're in school. What was the next like jumping off point that got you another step closer to kind of where you are now?
Just another one of my best friends. His name's Tim. He plays drums for Our Last Night, and I was going to school in Lowell. Closest city was Nashua, New Hampshire, and these guys were right from outside of Nashua. So it was he introduced me to them, and I knew Tim from like the hardcore scene and the punk scene, and we had been friends for a couple of years at this point. We met in high school. And he was just like, hey, like this band I just joined is looking for somebody to come sell T-shirts. Do you want to? We just got signed to Epitaph Records. We have this booking agent. Like, it seems kind of legit. And I was like, cool. Like, let's do it. So I think it was that summer of 2008. Yeah, I would guess summer of 2008.
Okay.
Went on like the first like East Coast tour.
And so that was with Our Last Night?
Yep.
Okay.
Just conversion van and trailer, and maybe it was even a full.
Were they supporting somebody at that point?
Man,
or was that
what
just them doing random
I think
shows?
It was Four Letter Lie. One of the tours was with this band Four Letter Lie from Minnesota. And now their claim to fame, in my opinion, is Kevin, who's now in A Day to Remember. But
4 Years Strong actually did a show with them in Michigan at one point.
Yeah,
He was still
so
in that
they
band.
kind of like took over the peninsula for a little bit in that like whole like screamo-y, pop punky thing, you know? Yeah, and so we just supported. And then there was a bunch of like miscellaneous like support. It was all support stuff. Opening, second slot, just stuff like that. And yeah, it was just like that. And then I met this band from Florida called Versa Emerge. And I guess Our Last Night wasn't doing something, or I just like, they just got signed to Fueled by Ramen. So I was like, oh, that's a big deal for the time period. Let me see what that's about. And so I stayed with Our Last Night for like over a couple of, maybe just a year or so. It felt like longer, maybe 2 years when all said and done.
I think all the time warps together at that point.
And then I joined up with Versa Emerge, who is this female-fronted like pop punk band, like kind of like a dark Paramore, which they always hated to be compared to, but they were like literally got signed when Fueled by Ramen was put on the map by Paramore, you know, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that era, that 2006, 2007 era, I think a lot of labels in that world were looking for another version of that so they could also compete. So I stuck with them from like the end of 2008, early 2009 to 2010. Yeah. 2010. And like that was like when it was like gung ho. They had a big label, they had a big agent, or who was their agent? They were out on the...
They were like out on the grind. Like
they were also out on the Vans Warped Tour.
They were.
Because I
2009.
feel like we definitely crossed paths on that.
Was it 2009 that you were on?
Might have been, yeah. No, 2010.
I was on 9, 10.
Yeah, it was
12, 13.
I feel like we actually spent some time on, it was probably 10.
Yeah.
10 for sure, that I remember you out there.
But yeah, that's like
grinding away.
Yeah, me and Nate, who was one of my best friends growing up. He was in a couple hardcore bands locally, and like he came on as our merch guy, and then him and I on our first Warped Tour actually ran the Fueled by Ramen tent, coinciding with tour managing Versa Emerge on Warped Tour. So we like ran both, and we just had them set up next to each other every day.
I don't think I ever in that timeline realized you were doing that.
Mm-hmm. And so that's how, later, if we fast forward, a Rocket to the Moon joined up with Warped Tour, and they were signed to Fueled by Ramen as well. And in Las Cruces, New Mexico, I got an email a couple weeks prior about doing a Rocket to the Moon Versa Emerge co-meet and greet. And Britton Billick was tour managing a Rocket to the Moon. And so I knew of this guy, Britton Billick, from like the New England scene, this young kid trying to be a tour manager. And for me, I was like, kind of, fuck him. Like, that's my claim to fame.
Right.
I'm the young kid being a tour manager. And like, he was working for the Cab and then a Rocket to the Moon. And So that day was the first day we like officially met, even though we were probably 60 miles from each other growing up. So
on Warped Tour.
On Warped
in
Tour
Las Cruces.
2009, Las Cruces, New Mexico. It's
And
like the first day I've met my wife, essentially.
For real, because this is literally your best man friend of all time.
Yeah, he's one of my closest friends, and
friends.
continues to be. And he and I have kind of came up in the industry together, which is, I think, really special about us. And of course, we've met, people I'll consider lifelong friends around the same time, and seeing everybody come up. Where like, it's really cool that, each band has brought a different chapter of life and chapter of people and meeting and he and I compare to two old ladies in South Florida that are retired, because we'll talk 7 times a day, and even if it's literally
about nothing. Yep.
It's like, hey, I'm gonna run to the store, but I got to call him and tell him what happened as I was on my way to the store.
But could you call him one of your most in your current state relatable friends, because you guys have seen so many similar things? You must, like I have friends at home that they finally understand what we do or have done for a living, but they still don't totally get it. It's like musicians
100%.
It's like musicians talking to musicians, actors talking to actors.
Exactly.
It's
just that common mindset that my best friend Eric Reed from Boston, I've known since 7th grade, and he's been one of my best friends since 7th grade, and to this day is one of my best friends. And hanging out with him is like the best feeling in the world, because we just pick up where we left off.
Sure.
But we can go 6 months, 8 months, 9 months without talking.
Those are my favorite kind of people.
Just like the childhood, best friend. So it's cool. It's special to have kind of those different categories of friends. But yeah, that day was it.
All right, so meeting Britain, and then was Rocket on Warped Tour for the rest of that, or for
something
stint?
For like a chunk of it.
And then you finished. You were tour managing Versa Emerge at that point.
Yeah, so that's 2009 tour managing,
and then you guys went on a tour with A Rocket to the Moon.
Yeah, later that fall we actually ended up touring. That was with Boys Like Girls and Cobra Starship.
Rocket was not even headlining. That was just I imagine at that point
it was
either
like
Boys Like Girls or Cobra that were.
It was Boys Like Girls. I don't think it was even a co-headline. It was just Boys Like Girls. The Ocean Spray tour, the OP tour,
sponsored by.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was like 6 bands.
The heyday of the corporate sponsorship in like
in
pop
punk world,
emo world.
So
okay.
we did that, and then we became really close on that one. That was awesome, because I think Verso was like 1 of 5, and they were 2 of 5. So
you guys had a lot of time together.
We had a lot of time together.
After you both
a lot
played.
of time to cause some ruckus. We were both in vans and trailers, so we kind of piggybacked off of each other, and it was a lot of fun. Like those tours we look back at now as like, man, we really didn't have any responsibility, But I'm so thankful, because like you meet, I mean, it's more in your world too, or both of our worlds. Like these kids are coming and getting introduced to touring with a college degree, and their first bus tour is on a private jet, or like their first tour is on a private jet, and you're like, you have no idea,
right? It's hard for me to balance that sometimes, meeting people who I know have never sort of taken the route that you and I both took, where I went to college, but then I my only goal was to get on the road, and that meant sleeping in a van with a bunch of other smelly guys, and sleeping in a trailer with a bunch of other smelly guys, and then sleeping on people's floors, and having that experience. And that it went from getting an interesting college experience of like the next level of your life and learning how to be an adult, to then kind of working your way back, regressing a little bit, but also it's another education. It's an education in music and touring, and navigating how you deal with people, your peers, because in my case, they were my peers. And I imagine at that point, the Versa Emerge camp, they're your peers. Like they're not much older or younger than you, those kids, right? Like
nope.
It wasn't like
we were all around the same age. Besides like the singer, she was younger, but still.
But it wasn't like you were talking to a bunch of 40 or 50-year-old people. So it's finding a way to manage your peers. And so I guess the follow-up question to that is, on that tour and then leading forward, who who kind of became your mentor? Because I know, like we're saying, you can't learn it all out of a book. You can't. It's about an experience. And I feel like I had in my early years around that same timeline. So 2007, 2008, 2009, I had a lot of amazing tour manager mentors who were a little bit older, had been doing it a little bit longer, and was able to kind of watch and listen. And I that is what I took away from that era too, is I needed to just be quiet sometimes and just observe. It wasn't about asking a million questions. It was about just watching what they did.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of essentially what I've told every like younger kid that says they want to get involved. It's like, go do whatever you can, whenever you can, for whatever money, and just watch and learn and steal. And when I say steal, it's like, you like someone's day sheet template, go try to make it your own on Microsoft Word or Pages.
Like the one that you're still using is made its rounds. It's a version of a master tour.
Yeah, sheet, I mean, I have a couple
people have made them editable, so like they don't have to have master tour, and they can just. It's the same format.
It's cool, you know, when some of like the people you have looked up to like asks you for your sheets or like, hey, do you have a template for this? And you know, at the time, Chris Holland is his name. He was tour managing Boys Like Girls, and he's just like, you know, he's a big, scary...
He is a very big, scary man.
Roided out, tattooed freak, and...
Sweetheart. Could be a sweetheart. Was always a sweetheart to me.
He was always a sweetheart to me. He took me under his wing, and he and I had a lot of friends from you know, other music scenes, and he kind of took me under his wing, and he gave me some sheets, and he kind of like let me sit in his production. I was the only one allowed to sit in his production office and kind of sit in on settlements too. And he introduced me to Mark Mosley, like officially, even though I had been through Nashville a couple of times. But like, you know, he was somebody I looked up to because I really liked the presence in which he had, which wasn't always the best because he used kind of a fear. Because of his size, he was like kind of using the fear tactic, which I've developed. Like, I don't know, you kind of take certain pieces of it. And then from that, like, I don't know if he'll ever listen to this because he's now a friend of mine, but Andrew Weiss is still one of the like tour managers that I look up to, and he's still touring to this day. And he was with Paramore. And when I met all the Paramore crew, like when they were with different bands,
and Andrew Weiss,
one of the best
in the industry, known to, if there's any issues on the road, they bring him in and he kind of straightens everything out and gets the tour running like clockwork.
Yeah, and he's terrifying.
Last thing I know, he was doing 21 Pilots, and so you know, talk about a guy who's at the top of the tier of you know, big touring,
and he's done it for so long. So you know, now I'm thankful to call him a friend and know that I can text him with questions and he gives me a straight up answer, and like I can run by ideas off of him, and he does the same too, which is really a cool feeling because for the longest time, like me and my friend Rob, who has gone off to be a massive production manager and tour manager, we used to print out pictures of Andrew Weiss and then take pictures of us praying to it. Like,
oh my God. You guys would do something like that.
So it was just fun,
you know, but a very well respected person in the industry.
That's it. Like he has a lot of respect. And he's worked really hard for that respect, and it's validated. You know, I don't think he's a guy that's had anything handed to him, and he's the definition of how to settle a show. Like
I've also heard logistically the most genius move is, and I've heard this from another mutual friend of ours, Charlie Bybee. He will make sure that every case going into a truck is truck pack, so it just goes in a truck. There's no order, just send it. And it might be a little costly up front to an artist, but if you can just
saves
pack
on the back end.
It probably saves so much on labor. Genius. Like hearing that, and at first you're like, I don't, what, and then you go, oh yeah, if that just cut 45 minutes, an hour off a labor call at the end of the night.
30 hands.
Early stages of touring, nobody thinks about that. We loaded a trailer with maybe 2 or 3 extra people if we were lucky, or we loaded it ourselves, right? And so you don't even think about that, but as you kind of go on and start to, I don't, in what I do now, because I'm the production coordinator, I don't really see the labor bill that goes to the production manager, but knowing what I know about some of the markets in our country, it can be pretty hefty. So if you're able to shave time off, you just save the tour thousands of dollars in some cases. So, you know, to think
even,
that...
I mean, just take a 30-day tour or 30-show tour, excuse me, and you have on a bigger tour is upwards of 30 hands. And even if, 1 hour of that's $25 an hour, you're at $600 an hour, right? Wait, 25? No, more. Hold on. Edit this part out.
Also, while Mike's doing some quick math, just to explain to anybody who's listening that doesn't totally know our lingo, like Mike just explained, he says K for contract, which I could probably pick up if I was reading an email. Hands or loaders or stage hands are the folks who help unload and load a show in and out of an event locally. And so without them, I've seen it more and more lately, even somebody like a Taylor Swift thanking everybody down all the way to the bottom. I watched her most recent Netflix special, and she took a moment to pause and thank not only her team, but I think it's kind of important. There's a lot of people working in the background, and you don't really see the full picture till you move on and up and see how many, it really does take, how many people it can take to put a show on at a larger scale. So the loaders, hands, stage hands, there's a lot of different terms, but those are the people bringing in anything that it takes to put up and put on a show. And they're paid for locally, and if without them, the team that's traveling, so the tour team that Mike and I are usually a part of, without people like that, we're stuck. So just to give you a terminology piece there. You just did math. So
saving that 1 hour that Charlie was talking about,
right,
times 30 hands, it's $750 an hour times 30 shows. You're looking at $22,500 across the whole tour that you could save your artist. And that could be, that can put towards crew bonuses for the tour, or just making your artist some extra money so he wants to keep you around, It's not always that cutthroat, but,
right.
But it's just like, it's the bigger picture that I've really enjoyed getting to know is like it's just common like budgeting, you save $5 over the course of 100 days, you're saving $500, just something like that.
Now Versa emerged, and then what was it? There had to be a transition from there.
From there, I was tour managing and doing some merch with Versa. Then we brought out a merch guy. So I was like doing everything else with Versa Emerge. And then I got a job offer with this group, Owl City. And that was just for merch management. And that was spring of 2010 when Versa Emerge was in the studio, I believe. So I was just free. And I went and I looked at it as I want to get to know every position on the road so I can better myself in leadership by understanding each role. And so I went out as a merch manager for Owl City, getting paid like, I guess, I don't know if he'll listen to this, but getting paid like $500, and they were doing very, very well in merch because of their fan base, and
right on kind of on the tail of a major hit for that world.
Yeah.
Fireflies.
So every show was sold out tenfold in multiple nights.
But that was about 1,500 capacity rooms.
Yeah, 15 to 5,000. So it was cool. So I was handling a lot of merch, and like trying to understand proper merch management. And I was still bouncing between Versa Emerge and Owl City for 2010. And then they told me about a summer tour, which conflicted with Warped Tour 2010, but it was to support Maroon 5 for a month and then John Mayer for a month. And it was just a 2-band bill.
Right, and this was Owl City.
This is Owl City. Okay. So I wasn't sure if I was going to take it or not. I confirmed Warped Tour with Versa Emerge. And while on Warped Tour, they came back and they confirmed me for this Owl City tour. And I looked at it as like, not trying to leave anyone hanging. I was young, but like the experience and the knowledge I could just get by being present
around something bigger
will help me tenfold than, being it that I was with a group for almost 2 years. I was just like, growth was still happening, but maybe not as fast as I wanted to. And, so I went out with Owl City. I took that job and I left Versa, got somebody to come in and take over. And, we, from there, it just like kind of went I don't know, just like, it was a very cool experience. Musically, as a fan, it was awesome to watch every day. Production-wise, I would just wake up early and just watch the trucks get tipped or get loaded in and, the stage get built. And we had very minimal production and stuff, but the Owl City crew became some of my closest friends, and we were all around we were all around the same age. So there was a cool little close family vibe with that crew. We had two buses and one truck, or two trucks, one truck. I think one truck.
And did you start to get a better feel for logistics, which I know you've become pretty great at this point of where you're at in your career. So did that, being on a tour, two different types of tours, were those two, was Maroon 5?
Yeah, it was like a month with
separate?
Maroon and then a month with
So you got
John.
to see two different camps at an arena level or a shed level.
At that level, I wasn't really exposed to that stuff. I was more exposed to wow, there's 10 trucks and 5 buses, or 10 trucks and 10 buses. How I didn't really speak to any of the production managers, because at that point they were like, you're just the merch guy for the opening act. Don't waste our time, And one of the guys was an older fella, and he was just, you're now what I know is just your old jaded road dog.
Yeah, I think it's tough to want to try to break into those era of touring folk, because they're a little bit hard. They're busy, but you and I both know now, after we see what the day looks like, there's a point where you maybe could have gone in and quietly
so
tried to have
I did
a chat.
That with
but
John Mayer's merch guy, Matt Bear. He was with John. I actually don't know what he's up to now, but he was with John for 10 years. He was John's first merch guy.
Yeah, I feel like he's a pretty loyal, seemingly from what I've observed. I don't know the camp, don't know John Mayer at all personally, but he seems like if you get in and you do your job
John's
well,
one of the most loyal people.
Yeah, if you do your job well and you get his vibe, you're going to probably stick around. So.
Yeah, and I mean, Matt showed me a lot, and he taught me some tricks, and he when I was having some issues with management about how I was doing my job, he kind of stuck up for me and said, an example was I'm not counting in enough merch and stuff's going to run out. But from Matt's end, he's actually, this is my tour and you guys are on it, so I'm not going to allow you to count in all this merch, because it's going to waste everyone's time and prolong things that are inevitable, which just means you need to trust people to do their job and let me know when we run out of something, and then I will bring you more. I will,
and
restock.
Also learning the value of I also, like Mike, multitasked early on, and then got to a point where I was just selling merchandise for an artist. And then at that sort of same level where you're handing over, you were probably limited to a certain amount of designs, usually with support acts.
2 shirts.
Yeah, it's pretty limited. The headline artist, when you get to an arena, has 20 different designs. And you get out there, if it's a John Mayer or Maroon 5, they've got a million things because they're trying to make all the money. And then the artist that's opening, if you've ever wondered why does so-and-so only have 2 shirts? Well, it's because the headline artist usually sets the precedent. Exactly. Some are nicer than others. I don't want this to sound like I'm slighting anyone, but
it's just it's not your support on someone's personal tour, so they make the rules.
And it's also pretty industry standard. It's not any of those artists aren't necessarily doing it. It's usually in a contract from the agent, et cetera.
It comes from the top.
So it comes from the top, and it's a standard, and it's just kind of how business is done. And then when it's your turn in the sun, you get to set that precedent. But, you're pretty limited, but you also, you can upset the house, which if they have to count in and out the opening artists, which they know aren't going to sell as much as the headliner. No. So it was good that you were getting the advice from, as much as your team was telling you otherwise, you have to listen to the person who's well-versed in your job.
He looked out after me, and, I got to hang with him a bunch, and he was a really good dude. And if he happens to listen to this, I hope he's well. I don't know. Great. I haven't talked to him in years.
See, I feel like I saw you, literally physically saw you on that Owl City tour in San Diego. I won't forget it, because I feel like you were trying to keep your head above water. But I think I've in the time.
Was it at Soma?
Was that Soma?
Oh yeah, that was a nightmare.
So
I remember that day.
I'm sure that was busy. It
wasn't even. It was busy. It was the old owner, or maybe even the current owner. It was a benefit show for a young girl that had committed suicide.
Oh, I don't even know if I knew that.
It turned into that.
Okay.
She was a massive Owl City fan, and she in her note mentioned Owl City, and Owl City himself, if you will, like made sure that all of the profits, all of the money went to her family after the show.
Wow.
And so, you know, because of that, it's like waive the merch fee. They waived the merch fee and whatnot. And it was really like met her family. It was heavy, you know, heavy stuff. But the owner of Soma came up to the merch table at the end of the day and was like, here's the list of everything I need. And I'm like, okay, well, it's going to cost you. He's like, do you know who I am? I was like, no, I don't care who you are. He's like, I own this place. I'm like, that's cool. My name's Mike. And he's like, I'm not even collecting a fee, and you can't even give me a free shirt. And I was just like, one shirt's one thing, but a shirt for every staff member and every family member of yours is completely different. So I get on the walkie-talkie and I radio our tour manager and I get her involved. I'm like, you got to come talk to this dude because I'm counting out. I need to get out of here, blah, 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 blah. And it was like a huge thing. And then eventually I got back involved, and like some of the Boston came out on me, and I was just like, I just started speaking up, being like, yo, man, you're a fucking scumbag. Like, we did the show for a girl and her family, like, suffering a loss, and you're now trying to, like, make money off of that after it was already agreed upon that it was just going to be a good thing. You know, keep the concession money, whatever you were going to do, you know, like, but our profits were going to her, or our monies were going to go to her.
Right, like, it wasn't even like, even if you guys did really well that night, it wasn't going in Owl City's pocket. He had already said he was going to donate
And it
money.
was just like, it just set me off because I was just like, you know, as we come across tenfold, you're just a scummy dude, you know?
Well, and I think the thing about it is using your judgment and what you've learned as a human at that point. And then also, there's been plenty of times where you were saying, you know, you learned a little bit from, you could observe Chris Holland and see that sometimes you need to put your fist down on the table, but sometimes you don't. And it's discerning when it's nice, happy, smiley Mike or Evan in my case. And then sometimes where people just aren't listening, and there's just this, they think they're right, or it's a situation where you kind of need to be a little bit more firm. Okay, so, but anyway, that was when I saw you, and I don't even think I realized that you then went on these larger tours, and that was where you got a little bit.
Yeah, so that was cool. And then after that, so the fall, so at that point I had moved on from Versa Emerge, and Owl City had a fall tour. And I think I found out before this before this shed run or amphitheater run with those two artists, like I found out that they weren't going to take me on the fall run. So I just had like a year I quit my job, or essentially quit Versa Emerge.
Right, your main gig at that point. My main gig,
accepted this, but then found out after I did all that, while still on tour with Versa Emerge, hadn't started the Owl City dates yet. Or the Owl City summer dates, like they weren't going to take me on their fall stuff. And so while on Warped Tour still, I just started making it known I was going to be available. And I was like kind of panicking because I was like, you know, I just gave up my gig. Like I need to work.
Right. I was actually explaining this to someone yesterday, a college student, and she was trying to understand what we do for a living. And I said, she was like, oh, so you have a contract? I'm like, yeah, but it's not like a traditional work contract where it's a 6-month contract or a year contract and you get, and she was like, wait, so when you're not on the road, you don't get paid? And I said, no, we truly are, you know, until you get to a certain point, you know, where if you're lucky enough to have a salary or a retainer, some sort. But a lot of the time, you know, we're jumping from job to job, and you start to have that feeling of
panic.
But also at that point, you have a little bit, you know, a little bit of experience under your belt, and I imagine that if you had met enough people to maybe foray that into the next gig.
Yeah, then we met. You know, that summer I met my beautiful, one of my best friends, Jake Paulson of Anchorhead Coffee.
Jake Paulson.
Paulson Pro Audio at gmail.com. And he was tour managing, doing
please
sound.
Send Jake an email if you're listening. Yeah. I'm pretty sure his email hasn't ever changed.
No, I still email him.
Everybody send Jake an email and tell him we said hi.
Yeah, I met him and he was miserable. They were on the Ernie Ball stage. He was doing TM front of house. He hated his life.
Was that Mayday Parade?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so then I, you know, linked up with him and I was like, hey, I'm free end of September, and they were just about to do the Fearless Records Friends tour or whatever, Fearless Friends tour. And I left that tour, left Warped Tour with 2 months of good work with Owl City, but then also knowing I was going to get back into something I had way more passion in, which was tour and production management. And so then I got hired by Mayday Parade, and that was like the first tour with a bus and truck. Before it was just a bus and trailer. So now we had a box truck, and then we had 3 other buses with trailers plus 2 vans and trailers. So like our footprint was big. So we were
for a show, like a tour of that size.
Yeah, going to 1,500 cap
yeah.
House of Blues and stuff. So it was nice. That's when it like really started to like gear up on the logistics end, and parking every day was a nightmare.
And having to figure out where to put things and
using
how many
clip
vehicles.
art to clip art and screenshots of Google Maps just to figure out how you're going to fit everything.
Right.
And yeah, and that's when I had my first crew. I was like really had my first crew that I was in charge of. We had a team. We had drum tech, guitar tech, front of house guy.
And was Jake not involved?
No, he was still. He just
wanted to do
stuck
audio.
with audio. Yeah, and he like kind of handled like day of show production stuff when I was in the office. And
right,
yeah, that's kind of where I developed that's where I took some of the things I saw from the other TMs. And my favorite line back in the day, and still to this day, is like, if you see me on stage, something's wrong. You should never want to see me on stage. I have no reason to be on stage at this point.
Sure.
So if I'm on stage, you fucked up. Someone fucked up.
Right.
So it was nice with all these like little emo bands to say that and just see them like kind of shit their
because at that point, if there's a team of people, guitar tech, drum tech, a front of house audio tech, and then potentially and also a monitor engineer, there's no reason for the tour manager to be up there unless it's a planned thing where they're supposed to be up there. The tour manager should be working on advancing the next show or taking care of whatever the band coming off stage. And
exactly,
I think every tour manager's involvement with the show is different. Some of them are still hands-on. Even I just came off a tour over the summer with the group Pentatonics, big name Shed tour, but there's 5 of them, and so their tour manager is still very involved in, just because we have a team and we're helping as much as we can, but she likes to be there because she wants it to go off well. And there's nights where she's more involved or less involved, but it's still cool to see that people care, and even at that level just want everything to happen efficiently. And in that case, it's not a problem if she's there, but I think for you to be able to set that precedent at that point, because how old were you at that point? Now, so we're a few years into you really touring. So
that's like 2010, so 21, 22 years old.
Right.
Oh, so I was 22.
Yeah, because it's 2019, folks. I can't believe it.
It's 2000. Yeah, so I was 22 because I started in the fall time of 2010.
Right. So as a 22-year-old, person, you were able to kind of set a precedent on like, I trust you all to do your jobs now that I have people who can and should be handling their respective areas, and I think that's kind of the next for any of us. If you get to a point where you have your one goal of the day and one role in a team, on the crew side, that's your goal, to not be wearing so many hats. And so Mayday Parade, tour managing, and then I feel like you were with them for a little bit.
Until 2012. So they took me all around the world, and that was really fun. I had gone to like UK and Europe with Versa Emerge and with Owl City, but Mayday was the first group to really go to Australia, go to Asia, go to Southeast Asia, go to Japan. I guess that's Asia, but like, South America.
Come to Brazil, dude. Come to Brazil.
I'm going to move there. But yeah, they were like the first group, and I loved them, and we worked really well together, and eventually I became their day-to-day manager for about a year, and then they fired their manager, so I became their manager for about 6-7 months before they hired their new one. So at one point, I was their manager, tour manager, and day-to-day manager, and that's when that's where I found my there's too much responsibility.
Sure.
I had to deal with my first major record label release. And
was that with Atlantic still, or
that was with Independent, because they had moved from Atlantic to Independent, which is still all Warner, but
right, but it's under the Warner flag.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we made it happen, It was great. I loved the experience I got. Obviously, I was very involved with the decision making of the group at that point, and I was not just a tour manager, but at a certain point, and Alex, the guitarist of Mayday, lives here in Nashville with us, and
potential future guest here, because we'd love to sit down with Alex as well.
And he's a very, very, very close friend of mine, and when we would always have to share hotel rooms on fly dates, and he was my roommate all the time. So he and I spent a lot of time together.
Good roommate to have.
Oh, awesome. So he said it to me the other night that he noticed that I rode the wave of Mayday Parade out to a point where I just kind of saw it get to a certain point that my services were no longer needed. And it was time for me to move on to keep going, and he was right. I rode the Mayday Parade wave a couple years until a point where I was like, I've gone through all the growth that I can see this growing. It's time for me to move on.
Well, also with this, I know, take nothing away from this as far as me just saying this, but your level of experience, they needed to be handed off to somebody who could maybe keep it going. And you had other goals, I imagine, too. But
yeah, I was getting bored. And when I get bored, I start losing focus, and just as we all do. And they gave me 2 years of awesome experience, and forever grateful to that. But it was just time to move on.
Give me a good takeaway from that, because that slight transition, sort of, you were on the road and you had that experience, and you got a chance to see what artist management could look like, even if it was forced into, or by proxy in that case.
We missed our flight in Japan, or our plane never showed up in Japan.
Okay.
So the band got hammered, and we were having some issues with upper management, and they just fired them hammered.
Oh my!
Sorry.
I feel like that's not that exact story, but the commonality of it's on a whim a lot of the time when bands make decisions, and they just all happen to be when you try and put a band in a room, they don't want to do it, but when they're all sitting together stuck somewhere,
my golly. Yeah. We drove 6 hours from Bandung, Bali, Indonesia to Jakarta.
Okay.
Got onto a plane from Jakarta to Hong Kong to Tokyo, and then our plane just never showed up in Tokyo. So we were stuck there for nine hours, and then got on a plane from Tokyo to LA. At that point, we had missed all of our connecting flights
in the States. Once you got back to the States,
had to deal with all those. It was just, I think that was one of the worst travel days I've ever had in my life. And for some reason,
okay, so these are the things I also want the average listener to understand. You think you got to see your favorite band, whether you saw them here domestically because they're an American band, or got to fortunately see them in Southeast Asia, in Japan, in Jakarta, Indonesia, in South America, and I just want everybody to understand that it takes a lot to get across the world, and not every band is lucky enough. And those are the days, those are the crazy points of it took 40 hours to get back to home, or whatever the amount of hours it was.
That was brutal.
Yeah.
If I drank, I would have been hammered. I would have been so drunk.
Okay. So, but all right, what was your takeaway? So then that happened, you transitioned into management for that period of time and kept the ship sailing. And so give me a takeaway, a non-touring takeaway then, I guess, from that experience, or something that you learned that you can now apply to when you're dealing with management or a label, or and so now that you got to see a little bit of the other side of it, how you maybe handle yourself with a manager, because you learned another little avenue to go down.
I mean, the one thing I have learned, I think the thing I've taken away, not even just from that, but just in general, is there's no blue book or blueprint, and there really isn't. Everyone does the same exact job differently, and so some people, the way they do it is better than how other people do it. And that's kind of the coolest part. So with specifically Mayday Parade, I learned that I really loved being involved with decision making, even if it was just at a touring level.
All right.
Just because it added a little more depth than what a normal tour manager sometimes can deal with. And that's when most of my positions I've had have skirted the lines of day-to-day manager, because I just forcefully get myself involved, because if it has to do with the road, it has to do with me, whether that is confirming and contracting shows, or merch deliveries and merch designs and lighting designs and visual, the video loops for big video walls, and it technically is under my umbrella of management. So
Well,
I
guess
just like
you just want to make sure it's done right the first time.
Yeah,
or
I
or
really
close
hate
to
when
right.
somebody doesn't do their job.
Yeah.
And even if that means it's going to add a little work to my plate, I'm willing to do it just so for the artist's benefit,
I mean,
it can relieve some stress on them.
in a theory, you want to be a team player. That's the goal.
Ideally.
And I think I've found myself over the years getting involved in more than maybe the average other person on tour thinks I should be. I don't want to see it fail. I guess I care too much to a fault at times where I should have just been quiet and let things progress on. But I don't know. I guess I never want to see it go down in flames.
It's hard to disconnect from that. I think that's just a personality trait because I think that's where you and I are very similar. Is like we're very passionate about the job that we're doing or the task at hand, and sometimes it's to a fault when we shouldn't care as much and just kind of. And I've gotten better over the years about kind of letting other people's departments fail, and then I step in, and I just even have to say that to the artist himself or he or she, that like, listen, it's not necessarily my job, but I will find out what happened,
right,
and I will make sure it gets back on track. And if the artist can't understand that, which some of them choose not to, it is what it is. You deal with the repercussions, but you do have to look out for yourself at the end of the day, because although it's a team effort, like it can be a cutthroat situation where like, why did you let this happen without bringing it to anybody's attention? So you just kind of have to make sure that there's some sort of paper trail or some sort of trail that shows that you did your due diligence, but you're not, I don't want to say you're not getting paid for that job, but it's not your job.
Sure.
So.
But also the other day I was talking to Isaac Burkhart, who's a producer on this show.
Throwing him under the bus.
He's the one taking care of all the stuff behind the scenes. He made a great point and the team has to sort of, all those people, all those links in the chain, they have to work together, and they sort of need to I said in harmony, and and like anything in life, if tempers are flared or if people have problems with other people, interpersonal problems, not necessarily job related problems, it spills over, because everything on the road always seems to be connected, whether you want it to be or not, because you're together all the time. It's not like a normal 9-to-5 job where you go home at 5:00 and you can disconnect from that person for a little while. It's you're with those people day in and day out for extended periods of time. So that for the hang to be a good vibe, which is a thing that I feel like some artists value more than having the most A+ perfect person in that job. It's that they do their job well, but they also, the vibe is good, and the person is a good person, and the team works well together. And
I always just say work first, friends later. And that is just sometimes why, my role a lot of the times isn't hanging out with the crew, but like with my current job, it's a very small crew. So we all hang out together. We're all very close, and we've been on the road together for a couple of years at this point. Like we know each other pretty damn well.
More of a family, because it's a smaller crew.
They also know that the uncomfortable side of it is like, if they mess up, I'm the one to tell them, and I'm the one to make sure that they fix it, because at the end of the day, like, the hang's great, love the guys, or love my crew, but we're all expendable.
Yeah, and you're all there to work.
And we're there to get a job done. And it's tough sometimes. People lose sight of that, or people are too afraid to have that confrontation with those people that they establish relationships with. And I'll never forget, I asked my dad when I started having a crew, and specifically that 2010 Mayday Parade tour, is when I asked my dad, I was just like, how do you be a leader? Like, how do you do this? I've only had one or two guys with me, and they're just my friends, and there's no real responsibility. But like, and my dad's been in construction management my whole life, and I used to work construction as a kid and stuff, and really until I was like 21, until I started touring, like all school breaks, everything was just on a construction site. So
a lot of pieces and parts and people moving,
and I was just like, how do you do that, but yet people still enjoy, like, say hello to you and like you,
right?
because I was having a hard time balancing like, oh, well, this older tour manager was such a dick to everybody. Like but like nobody liked him, but how can I find like a medium of...
But you want people to respect and listen to
like,
you, but be friendly to them as well.
He said two things. He's like, firm but fair. And if people can't handle that, then that's their own fault.
It's a pretty good mantra for life in
general. And that's it. Like, it's firm but fair. And that's how I still am. It's like, I may not always be the most pleasant, especially when I have my work face on, but I will always try to be fair. But it doesn't mean I'm gonna make sure I put milk in your coffee after I need something done. Like, I'm not gonna coddle you about it. It's just like, here's X, Y, and Z, right. Get it done. But if you look at X, Y, and Z, none of what I'm asking you to do is unfair and or out of your department.
Yeah, your scope.
So, and then the next thing was, people will respect you by how you manage their personalities. And that's kind of coincides with firm but fair. It's like, you learn personalities. You don't coddle to them, but you just, you gain respect through work, not through kissing ass and blowing smoke up people's ass. And I think maybe that's a Northeast thing. I know you have it too. It's just like, it's the East Coast,
being straightforward with people,
East Coast
trying
work
to
method or
sure.
East Coast personality. It's just like, cut the bullshit. Like, what do you need? And I'm still that way to this day. I'm just like, all right, hurry this part up.
Right.
Get to the question.
And I know I personally in that sometimes I'm a little wordy and I know that, but I've been trying as I even just get older in life to get better at that. If it's a thing that doesn't need a lot of words,
just being direct,
Yeah. I feel like people, I think that goes into relationships too. If the more direct you can be with the person you're trying to date or be in a relationship with, it works out. So, that's just a good life lesson, I think, in general. I find it hard at times to do that. I just do. And I am a little wordy with but I also have found myself recently, people will start in with me and I'm like, I know you're like, can you just, what is it? Say it. You're like, I know I do this too, but like, I know you're going somewhere, just get there without, beating around the bush so much. But, yeah, well, and so from that point and listening to that thought from your dad and being firm but fair, what's the next transition and how is that applied to kind of getting to where you are currently? So we're at Mayday Parade in 2012. So then, what was the next big transition?
I guess the next thing from there is I got to that end of the road with Mayday and I just needed some change. And I took on managing a tour, which was not with any specific artist. And that was the AP tour of 2012, right? Yeah.
So again, for anybody not in that world, Alternative Press AP tour, the magazine Alternative
and
Press.
Get a bunch of bands together. And so I tour managed the entire tour. And so that was mostly just accounting and logistics at that point. I didn't work for any artist.
Right, you were just dealing with the house every day.
And so that was like the next. So I had 6 bands underneath me that I had to look after, or not underneath me, but on the tour and dealing with different crews and stuff like that to just make sure, they're all taken care of.
Would you say that moment was your first time understanding and experiencing sort of like what a tour rep, like as opposed to being a tour
now looking at it, yes, but I just kind of treated it like the tour was a band as a whole. My band just had 42 people on it. You know?
But now thinking about it coming from the angle that you've seen, so like having somebody from a Live Nation or an AEG, if it's a tour, that was your role. You know, like that was your role. Was you were the middle person between all of the bands or the artists.
It was really nice to just be like, yo, your guys need to go do this, or like, hey, I need this from your camp.
Right, you had no real emotional value with anybody. Your job was just to be efficient.
Yeah, exactly. And I rode with the headliner, and again made some good friends. And
who was on that?
Miss May I, The Ghost Inside. I forget who else. Those were the two. I rode with Miss May I, but Jim, Jim Riley. Mm-hmm. He was in The Ghost Inside, so it was great to see a friend from Boston on the road every day. And those dudes are awesome. Love them. But yeah, and then from there, after that, I at this point, I had been touring from 2008 to 2012 straight, like one thing after another, on the road 9-10 months a year.
And at that point of, I'll say both our lives, that age bracket for me, that's it. That's all you wanted. You didn't want to be home.
No,
for the most part.
No.
You didn't.
Just
you
like,
wanted to
I wanted to work. I wanted to
right.
travel. I wanted to move. I wanted to see what else is next. So at that point, after that is when I like kind of hit a wall, and I was done mentally. I was just burnt. I was tired. I was super unhealthy. I just, all in all, was just like in rough shape mentally as well as physically. And so I just decided like I can't tour anymore. I was just like,
overall, you thought you were going to be done.
I quit. Yeah. After the AP tour, I cashed in and I was out, you know? And that was November of 2012. And I got off the road. I found CrossFit, found Lululemon, started selling really hot moms yoga pants and hitting on them. And that took me to like June of 2013.
All right.
And I was broke.
Were you in Massachusetts still at that point?
I was in Boston still.
Okay.
Yeah. I was broke. So I was like, I think I need to get back into touring because that's really all I knew. And
sure.
I based my life around my income that I was getting from there. And so I just started looking for work again. And I was like in a better headspace. I was eager again. And yeah, then I worked for, oh man, what was their name? It's like this young boy band. Oh shit. I forget. Sorry, Keith. Keith, the manager of All Time Low. It was like his little boy band project.
I'm trying to think who this could even be. Was it Big Time Rush?
No, I wish. Hold on. Let's phone a friend.
Mike's going to phone a friend here real quick. But I will just... Oh, he's actually phoning a friend. Wow.
Shit.
Millionaire style.
Who else knew? Big...
Anyway, you transitioned at that point back into a life on
touring.
the road.
Yeah, and so I took this boy band tour. It was one of two slot opening up on this theater tour for Cody Simpson, and it was comfortable. It was essentially like a momager, a mom who was the manager, and a dad that were out on the road, and the three young kids. We had a small crew. It was just super easy. I was miserable because it was just like really boring. I couldn't connect with the guys. It was just like I was very like it was
right
just,
as opposed to earlier what I was saying where you were out with your peers and it's people your age and you're able to kind of connect.
But then when on that Sheep called me and was like, "Hey, I got a job offer from 30 Seconds to Mars I have to take, but I'm currently with the Used. Can you come go do Warped Tour with them as well as a handful of headline stuff."
All right.
And I was just like 100% because they used as me in 7th grade. It was like my favorite band.
One of the biggest bands of that era.
And I was just like, are you kidding me? So I...
Also, just to interject, Sheep, notorious tour manager based out of the UK. One of the greatest characters I've ever met in my life.
And still,
great human.
To this day, one of my dear, dear, dear friends. Yeah, he called me, and so I jumped ship again, or jumped ship at the time. I just was needing change, so I jumped ship, went and did the Used for like 6 months, and at that time I had already, right around like midsummer, I had confirmed this other band from the UK because one of my best friends, the first guy I ever shared a tour bus with on the first tour bus I ever had, Rob Highcroft, was with You Me at 6 for years, and he had moved on. And
I met Rob when he was working for them as well.
They passed... he kind of like passed the torch off to me, and I, for the longest time, was the U.S.'s version of Rob Highcroft, and Rob was the UK version of Mike Finn. So that's just, to this day, we're very, very similar, and he's gone on to be one of the largest. He's gone on to just crush it. I look up to him as a friend as well as a colleague. So I went and did You Me at 6 from there on out, and I took that tour. We had a couple of U.S. tours, and then I took it because of their size in the UK and Europe.
Right.
And
Truthfully, I stand by this and have stood by it since I heard that band play a note. They're one of the most underrated bands in our country ever. They just are.
Yeah, they just have never had success.
There are other bands that do similar things here that have, just because they're Americans, they've had a little bit more success here. And you go anywhere else in the world, other English-speaking countries, I guess I should say, that I've seen them perform in, and they've played Wembley in the UK because that's where they're from, but like they just have never, for some reason, it didn't cross over here the same, even though they're in a vein like a Mayday Parade or the Maine or. It's pop rock and it's very accessible. It for some reason, like I know that they played Wembley. I've seen them in Australia play to 10,000 people, but they for some reason never crossed over here the same. I could never understand why. Super catchy, great hooks, well written songs, fantastic playing,
good
all
dudes
around.
Too.
Yeah.
So I worked for them because in the UK they do arenas, and I wanted an arena experience. So like. They were the first run. Like I had my a couple buses and one truck, but they were my first like 3-4 buses and 4 or 5 trucks tour. And I was tour manager and production manager. I hired an awesome stage manager who kind of acted as a day of show production manager. And he's my friend, Jack Dunnett. He's now with 1975. I met him on the 30 Seconds to Mars tour when we supported them in the UK and Europe. And it was just awesome. It was the most I had ever worked in 10 days, but it was the most rewarding too. And I was able to fly my dad over to London to see our Alexandra's Palace show, which
cool.
To that date was my largest headline show in my career.
What does that hold there?
14,000.
Yeah.
So but he finally, I think that was the day my dad finally understood what I did.
Sure.
Because I got him a desk next to me in the production office, and I said, bring a book or just hang out. We'll go to catering together.
Right, and he finally got to witness what you do. Yeah, and
we had touring catering with us. We had, 47 people with us. It was full on, and it was cool to. We stayed a couple of days after that was the last night of tour, so we stayed a couple of days and just went around London together. And he used to work there a lot because he built all the movie theaters there.
Interesting.
I don't know. I think they're called Showcase Cinemas there too. I don't know, but it was just 90s and the company he was there. But,
cool.
So it was cool to go see his old stomping grounds, like where he always stayed, and he still stays, which he's just like stuck in his ways because the hotel he stayed at used to be the 5-star property, and now it's like he has no idea, right. what a real 5-star property
sure.
looks like.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was really cool. And then that took me to April of 2014, and we had a U.S. tour booked with them, and we were going to go kind of straight into that after a couple weeks off, and just because of like ticket sales and just bad timing, I think they pulled the plug on the tour about 3 days before the tour started.
Wow.
And obviously that brought up a lot of concerns and commitment issues with what they had committed to for, more so for payroll and logistics, and just a lot of things got messy. And the band was with a manager that was unexperienced, whatever. And he was advising them to do the incorrect thing. Sounds like an alarm. But yeah, so we, at that point I was like, I just lost 8 weeks of work. I need to...
Again, to reiterate, it's a situation where I bet in that case you even already had a flight.
Everything. The buses were on the way.
The running
freight.
The running
Freight
thought kind of in the touring industry is it's not real until you have a flight. But in that case, you even had a flight and things were in process, and that's how much that world can shift on a dime. It really is always dependent on the artist. I mean, in that case, it was other factors, but if an artist gets sick or gets hurt, God forbid, doing something, that's more than their livelihood is at stake. And to somebody who has a job where most of the time, as long as you're the one showing up for work on time and you're there, and it's not a corporate structure that's also crumbling. Like there's some consistency and stability there, and for what we do, it can change instantly. And it's
but it's like moments like that I'm like the most. It's weird because I become the most thankful for, because to have that amount of money that you're dependent on, and that amount of work you're depending on, your life is based on, having that ripped out from you in a split second in the refresh of one email, refresh of an inbox.
Yeah.
Like that's how you learn how to deal with situations. Cause like, I mean, my bills still have to get paid, and my auto withdrawals, whatever, right. They still come, and regardless of if money's going in, the money's going to be going out. So it's like in that moment, how you handle it is like truly how you become a critical thinker, and you take a second to like say like, well, shit, you pick up the phone and you start copying and pasting the same email, and you berate everybody, just because there is plenty of work to be had. It's just in the level in which you're willing to commit and or like hustle, and also just accept a job that you may not want to do. I didn't want to do that little boy band, but I needed to get my bills paid. So when something else came that was better and it was a better fit for me, I moved on.
It also got you back in the game. It's a thing that
exactly.
you're able to. You have a continuation of work to prove as well.
Exactly. So,
all right. So so that happened. So what was picking up the pieces or trying to transition super fast? What was the next move?
I think Kate Truscott reached out to Daryl Benfield, and you know Daryl?
I don't know if I know Daryl.
He's down here. He was with that Aware touring company or whatever. They were fulfilling touring spots for country artists essentially.
Okay.
And so he said, I want to say Kate was like, called him or something, but he more or less hit me up. He was like, hey, I actually have a couple of country artists that are looking for somebody. Would you be interested? And I had already flown down to Nashville once to meet with Billy Currington's team, because it was between me and my friend Dustin, who is like short story on there. We both met when he was with Devil Wears Prada. And then he went on to do Celtic Thunder for a couple of years.
All right.
And now he then went to do Billy Currington, but on the final interview, it was to meet Billy.
Yeah. Okay.
And so we like crossed paths in the management office, and I hadn't seen him in probably 5 years.
Classic movie status.
And like we just like kind of like nodded because we both like recognized each other. And then for the remainder of like the 6 months after that, we thought each other hated one another just because it was like competition, And like
it was kind of like getting an acting role.
Yeah,
almost.
and I think one of us reached out to each other, and I was like, by the way, man, no bad blood, right? He's like, oh, man, I thought you hated me. And I was like, I thought you hated me.
Right.
And he's like, let's get coffee. And so we ended up working so I was up for 2 jobs. I chose one of them. And we both kind of signed on with a very unique artist, where we each had our own unique personality that we had to deal with. We would meet up like once a week just to have
Were you down in Nashville down here at that point, or were you still
so at that time I wasn't.
Transition
My resume said Boston, Massachusetts / Nashville, Tennessee, so I could even be considered for country gigs.
Right.
And now it's in the air, but like nobody knew that at the time because I wouldn't put my address. I would just put Boston / Nashville, and at the time Kate Truscott's address on McKinney was my address. Like I listed that on my like tax documents even, so at the time, no. And then when Daryl came to me with a couple offers, once I accepted one, I feel like I accepted it on like the 14th of May, and on the 17th of May, my car was packed and I was driving down to Nashville.
Wow.
So I moved down here around May 17th, 2014, and started working country from like May till end of September. And I realized that country at the time just was a little too, maybe the level in which the artists I worked for was just not as big as I needed. It wasn't too busy. It was really boring. Also a lot of in and out in country of Nashville. And that's why, a lot of sitting on the bus and not getting paid for it. And I get it. It's just the name of the game.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
And I'm definitely not arguing that, but it just wasn't, I don't think it was the right fit at the time, And so as I was going I teamed up with a company that like fulfilled touring jobs. So I was actually getting paid by the company. I'll never do that again. Because I don't believe somebody should be taking a piece of a day rate, even if you get them the job. Like, it's just, things can be done a little better in that direction.
Sure. And I feel like generally, those are rare. Those companies are fairly
They're getting
rare.
more popular, which is sad, but like it is rare.
Right, because traditionally,
at the time that they're rare,
you know, at least when we both started, even like let's call it a decade ago, it's word of mouth.
Exactly.
It's you're built on your name. You know, you built yourself on your name and,
Exactly.
and your resume, whether that's a paper resume or just word of mouth resume, and getting phone calls. Like so far, you know, in explaining how you got to this point, that was it. It was reaching out to folks yourself, and
it's just the hustle,
a cold call, or
letting your reputation speak for itself. Like later on, probably within the last 2-3 years, I heard a quote that I live by now, and it's work so hard so when you walk into a room, you never have to introduce yourself. And I think that's a guy named Jake Berry said that to a friend of mine. And Jake Berry is like Madonna's production manager, U2's production manager. He's like the biggest of the big. He's in his late 60s, maybe even early 70s. Like he's
been doing it
he's
forever.
a legend. He is a legend. And to hear that, like that just resonated with me. And I live to that. I want to work so hard that people know who I am when I walk onto a festival site, not in an egotistical manner, but just Mike, I've heard good things. It's great to meet you, you know, and or heard not good things, but they just know me, you know. And that's kind of like so. Right. At the end of September, I had already started quietly looking for work, and then. You know, I have a lot of best friends, but there's like the close people in my life are my best friends. So that's all that matters. But Anthony Amore, the legend, got hit up by this guy, this DJ that he sold t-shirts for on this kid's first ever tour years ago in 2014 or something. And was just like, you know, Anthony, I need a tour manager. And so he gave me my name, Brown Stew, and one other guy.
Stu Carmetz, to be fair.
Yeah.
Stu Carmetz. He's not offended by being called that, but
real quick, another guy
mentor. He was one of my mentors.
Yeah,
Stu
and
Carmetz.
Still to this day, like I said
that earlier. He is, when I think of that in my brain, Stu is the first person.
Stu is a good friend. You know, he's a good friend and somebody I've always looked up to too. He's just we've always been in a similar circle, and he's such a good guy, and I didn't even know he was up for it, but I don't know how it got chosen, but all Anthony said to this guy, so despite my resume that I busted my ass for, 7 years to date.
Right.
4, he was just like, this kid doesn't drink, he likes to do CrossFit, and he's a good tour manager. And that's all he told Dillon.
That's a pretty Anthony Amore statement, though, as well.
Yeah, and that week, Anthony told me that he put my name forward. That week, I got an email with like, "Hey, you available for this tour in the fall?" And at the time, I was still with the country artist, and I was just like, yeah, I am, because I was very unhappy, and my job is very personal to the artist. So if that doesn't click, it's hard to do your job. It's hard to, especially on a smaller camp where you're more involved. If it was a larger camp, I could just have an assistant deal with it, But yeah, and there we are. That was for almost. It's going to be 5 years, which is insane to think about this year. 5 years in September, if I can make it. My goal is.
I think you're going to make it. And are we at liberty to say who this person you work for is? Because I think that's, he's become a part of your life. So I think it's an integral understanding.
He's become he's a part of the family at this point, but do I need to?
You go ahead.
Oh, Dillon Francis.
Yeah. So Mike has been working for, one of the funniest DJs, I'd say, currently out there in the mix. He doesn't take himself too seriously, which I think that's why he has a very fun and unique fan base. And I think Mike has gotten to experience them all firsthand. But so talk about that transition, going from touring in a van with some of your friends to then making it to the point where you got in a bus with a trailer, then you moved on and it was a bus and some buses and trucks and vans, and to now going into this world where you literally could do shows with a backpack on your back if you had to. And so like
I think it goes back to what I was saying about just being in an experience-based job. My ideas of being being good at my position means that I'm experienced in all different aspects of it. And one of the aspects is genres. And I now have a rock. I have the pop. I left out a couple artists, but like I have the rock, I have pop, I have country, and now I have EDM and dance and electronic,
which is one of the biggest money making
right now,
genres
it's like,
in the world.
Yeah, right now they're the new '80s hair metal in terms of business and lifestyle and whatnot. And again, I took it to grow, and it just happened that our personalities were a really good fit for each other. And after the trust came, after about a year and a half of working with each other, he's allowed me to take his touring business and just take control of it. And at the end of the day, it's his call, but the way he works is he compartmentalizes, and he has certain people that he trusts on his team to take care of certain decision makings, and one of which is his touring with me. And not necessarily the full confirming shows and stuff and the contracting of shows, but everything else,
from that point on.
I go to him with a 70% finished product with like, by the way, this is where we're going with it. And he's like, why? And I tell him, and he's like, great, usually, or he'll be like, no, I don't want to do it. But like, he knows that I really enjoy, and I'm very passionate about trying to do new things and like create a machine that is well oiled and functional and very financially viable. And he's seen that when he meets with his accountants,
right?
And he's seen that when he sees pictures of his shows that he had no idea what he was walking into, but allowed me some creative freedom to like design something cool with our lighting company
with an understanding of what he's going for, because there's trust. And
exactly.
Circling back to several of the things we've now talked about in the course of this, being direct with people. Then
did I ever tell you this? Like my first weekend of shows with him?
No, that's what we're here for, though. So tell me.
We're in the car ride back, or we're somewhere, and I was used to dealing with like artists that I need to check in on because they would never tell me if they were happy or not. They would just be like pouty face, and so I'll never forget this. I go to him like, "Hey, you all good? You need anything? Like, what can I do?" And he looked at me. He's like, "Mike, I'm a grown fucking man. If you ask me that again, I'm going to lose it. If something's wrong, I'm going to tell you." I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to head back to my hotel room and sit around and wait for a call. And he's like, great. I will let you know if I need anything. And I was like, sounds good, man. Like, you just made my job easier.
Well, right. So now it's a two-way direct street. It's two people.
And he's very upfront.
Yeah.
And that's very rare to come by. He's very forward, and he's very, like, if something's not right, he's going to bring it up. And, because of that, like, it just makes me want more success for him. Not in the sense for more success for me, but just like he's one of the good ones. So I want to see him do well, know, and he's done well, and he's considered an upper tier DJ, and we do some really cool stuff, and he's allowed me to get even more experience in large scale productions and multi trucks and outfitting arenas with our production and setting it all up and dealing, like essentially bringing the rock style, country style of touring into a different genre that's not used to that sort of stuff.
Well, all right. Well, in that vein, I'm going to jump into just more direct questions. Yeah, we're getting close to an hour and a half here, which I love.
I talk a lot.
We both do.
No one's going to listen this long.
Yeah, they are. I hope so, because we're going to get into the some interesting questions that are a little bit more rapid fire, except for this one. But you were just sort of heading in this direction. But so, give me the like holy shit moment for you as now a tour predominantly tour management career, and to this point now with Dillon, where you've hit that next level, larger shows, larger scale. Like you were just like, what was that like, holy shit, I'm doing this moment for you, and then with obviously for Dillon's career as well, but like, you're like, holy shit, like we just did X.
I think with Dillon specifically, it was like the fall or early spring of within my first few months with Dillon, we did EDC Mexico City, and at the time it was for 70,000 people. And to be on stage, even if I was like just plugging in a computer to like look out and see 70,000 people in front of the stage, like, I was like, this is big.
That's got to be insane.
Mm-hmm. So that was cool, but like I'm so I'm so removed from the crowd at this point that like it doesn't. I don't feel that anymore.
Okay. But like for now, like
every
that.
like headline, honestly, like the headline shows that we do with Dillon, where we design a new production for it, or he used to do these annual shrine shows in LA. Like those took a lot of work, and those were some of the hardest shows. But like when the show went off and the show was going, usually around Christmas or New Year's, so I could like walk around and give our crew a hug and say Happy New Year's, and then to like be able to, at this point, I kind of direct his shows from a production standpoint. And last year, I was even calling the show from my headset. To have that much involvement in the show, it's just like at this point, it's like, this is awesome. This is why I do this. And to have ticket sales reflect that is even a better feeling, Right,
it's validation for everybody.
Just like it
involved.
means like, okay, I'm doing something right if I can still work sold out shows, Yeah. And it's not always the case, but it makes it a little more enjoyable.
All right, now we're going to go shorter, more rapid fire. Mike Finn is also a big coffee person, as a lot of people that tour are. But I'm getting super specific. What is your go-to spot in Las Vegas? Because you spend a lot of time there now, at least once a month. Is that still happening for the most part?
He does 40 shows a year. There,
right. So Mike is in Vegas quite a bit, because when you work for a DJ, that's a lot of the crowd.
Vesta Coffee.
Okay.
For coffee. Publicus for coffee and food.
Publicus, I think Mike sent me there the last time I was there. Very
has
cool,
an amazing
cool
food program.
Old
but
strip area.
Vesta's coffee program has really turned around in the last like year or two, and it's really good.
All right. Well, so those of you traveling, if you're ever in Vegas looking for coffee, those are the two spots. All right. Now I'm just going to stick with the States,
okay? Because
I feel like it gets too broad if we go elsewhere. Favorite city to tour through in America?
Damn. Man, that's hard.
I know, but you got to have, and then it's tough because you don't want to, upset anybody either. But what's your gimme? You can be anywhere.
Yeah. Let me think. Seattle is one of them.
All right, well, give me top three then. To make this, if that makes it a little bit easier, give me your top three cities to tour through.
Seattle,
and that's obviously,
Boston,
of course, because you want to see Mike and Jake.
Yeah, just drink coffee for free. Remember that, Jake?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Well, Boston because home, so you get to see all the homies and
it's just always fun.
And fam.
Yeah. And then what would be the third? I'm trying to think. Like, it's like one of those like even like Dallas, but like Dallas isn't that good. I don't know. San Diego. Man, I don't know. That's so stupid. That's such a stupid.
But all right. So then I'll transition. Are you like me? You just are happy to travel because you get to see friends and family and.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even like. Yeah, it's weird because I don't really consider it traveling at this point. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like another day. So the city, I'll say it like this: my favorite cities to go to are the ones with my favorite coffee shops and friends. And then from there, my favorite coffee shop. So like Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Yeah, Madcap.
Like I would love to go there once a month solely because I can load my suitcase up with Madcap.
Coffee.
But I don't,
Right,
Grand Rapids, all my friends are around like Detroit area, but I don't really like going to Detroit. But yeah, I don't, wherever it's warm and nice. I don't know. Like,
all right.
That's a tough question. I gotta think of that.
I'm gonna now we're going for number one. So number one touring essential, and I'm not like your phone and your computer don't count because everybody's carrying those. Period. Like that's like a non-question. But then give me or something recently now that you've gotten to a certain level of touring that you think is a must.
Flashlight.
All right. I think any tour manager, any person that's dealing with an artist, okay, we'll go with flashlight. That's a flashlight. Essential. And now,
earplugs too, but
especially in your world.
Yeah.
Well, I guess in any world.
I can't go to a show without earplugs.
I've always said
my ears are so sensitive.
I wear them because I want to hear my grandkids speak someday.
That's cute.
Yeah, right.
I'm not
All
gonna
right.
live long enough
How
for
about
grandkids.
on an end note, advice you would give yourself about touring or the path you've ended up on 5 years ago and then 10 years ago, sort of when you were starting out? Just quick advice or things you would tell yourself to think about moving forward.
That's a good question.
Yeah, and it's two critical
Did you
points.
think of that?
I did. I'm thoughtful sometimes.
Man,
So 5 years ago, sort of in between heading.
Embrace the bad days. Work professionally,
Right.
Embrace them and be thankful for them. And know that there's a reason why they're happening. And that's not really on like a spiritual level or anything. Just like take the punches. Mm-hmm. It only makes you tougher, So that would be 5 years ago. And then 10 years ago when I was starting, be an alaccountant. No. Be a plumber. I don't know. 10 years ago man, I still have the same goal 10 years ago that I do today, and it's to do a headline show at Boston Garden. And that's when I know I've made it, because that's my church. That's like the motherland for anybody in Boston.
So would that 10-year advice be
get there?
Keep your eyes on the prize.
Just get there.
Yeah.
Even if you have to work for free, just get there.
Love it.
So that's it. I mean, just again, like do your job and do it to the best you can, whatever the job is. So you can't go to bed without knowing that like you truly did. And if you don't feel like you did, then don't sleep until you do. Because I think all my friends know at this point my amazing sleeping habits when they receive text messages and emails from me 24 hours a day. But
2 a.m. last night.
I fell asleep on the couch, granted, but
I think that's a great place to end, and a good offer of advice to anybody.
Or don't, and be mediocre like the rest, and I won't like you.
Oh boy. Well, Mike, thank you for sitting down and being a part of the Notes from the Road podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you. This is the virgin episode, correct?
The virgin episode.
I
Mike
just took your virginity.
Mike now is the first one to sit down and appear and offer some amazing advice. And I hope anybody that's listening is taking away something.
Can we take a bet on how many people listened? 100 or an hour and 40 minutes of this?
Yeah, we'll find out, because they'll tell us that they heard this part.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, thank you for listening.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you took well, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
And I hope all of you took away a little something, maybe laughed a little bit for those of you that actually know Mike Finn and laughed at some of his stories.
Oh, boy.
Do you have anything you want to, any other thoughts or things to plug or things to tell folks to check out? Because I feel like since you're not an artist, take care of each other. Oh, wait, actually, I want to leave on this note.
Okay.
Because we touched on it a little bit. I hate to now transition.
Fight who you have to fight, but take care of it.
All right, tell me one thing now that you do, because you said you took time off the road to get yourself kind of mentally right, which is a challenge out there. And I think this is something I do want to talk about every episode, because I think everybody has a different version. I know you CrossFit, and I know you've tried to now do that regularly in life. So is that what helps you stay mentally and physically sane? Because the difference being, we're traveling so much, we're out there, we're in close quarters, et cetera. Like, what is your thing now that...
Yeah, it's kind of turned into some sort of fitness or motorcycles or something, like a hobby. But never lose your hobbies. Like, make sure you find those things that allow you that mental freedom that you will need, because everyone's human, and you will get to the point where like you have no like more capacity in your brain and you need a break. So yeah, it's like for CrossFit, for example, it's the workouts put me in a mental state in which I some of them are so hard that I can't think of anything but that. But it ends, and then you're like, wow, I feel great. Now it's time to go back to work,
Cool.
So yeah, I would say, that's CrossFit's been that thing for me. And it helps that like you're surrounded by a bunch of like-minded people that want you to be a better version of yourself, and that can transpire into work as well. And somebody just tomorrow's a new day, and like give, like, what was this saying? Like, just do better on all levels. Tomorrow you can do better at a workout. You can not lift more, but like go faster, or like just every time you do something, try to do it 1% better. And that's kind of, a coach of mine told me that, and that's how he trained his team. And he's a very successful coach. And he took that from the French cycling team, that they changed the angles of their seat 1% difference. And over the course of a 300-mile bike ride, they got an hour of 60 minutes better time because of that, So think like that. It doesn't have to be drastic changes. It's just like, how can you be 1% better? That's what I would say.
Great. Well, I'd like to leave on that then. To do 1% better, be 1% better in your lives.
Every day.
And again, thanks for being a part of this maiden voyage.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. And see you.
Huge thanks to Mike for joining me. His advice is some of my favorite of all time. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram @NotesFromTheRoadPod, and subscribe and rate us on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, or your preferred podcast listening site. Notes from the Road is produced and engineered by Isaac Burkhart, along with production and design by Andrew Cook. Thanks. See you next time.